Originally featured in the September 2003 issue of Guitar World, Deftones, Feed Your Head. The Deftones, hard rock's most adventurous band, offers some serious food for thought on their new, self-titled space metal masterpiece by Jim DeRogatis. Stephen Carpenter is sprawled on a purple velvet armchair in the exotically appointed lounge of Larrabee Sound Studios, which is just off Santa Monica Boulevard in North Hollywood. And Carpenter is going about the task of rolling a cigar-sized joint with all the intensity of an alchemist attempting to turn lead into gold. Carpenter calls out to one of the band's roadies he needs a pair of scissors. There'll be no loose ends on this monumental spliff. The rolling completed, the token progresses, and Carpenter savors the fruits of his labor. After a time, Chino Moreno cheerfully bounds into the room and plops on a plush red couch. Carpenter wordlessly passes the spliff to the band's singer and occasional second guitarist, but he never offers it to me, and something about his manner suggests I shouldn't ask. At first, this business of bogarting the joint strikes me as a typical burst of rock star rudeness, but otherwise Carpenter, Moreno, indeed pretty much everyone in Deftones camp, seem like friendly and approachable folks, music lovers and regular guys just like you and me. It's just that theirs is an insular world, and they're coming out of a particularly insular period during which they wrote and recorded Deftones, self-titled, their fourth album and an effort 3 years in the making. We're like brothers with the bickering and everything else that's involved in being in a band, says drummer Abe Cunningham, who, like his bandmates, is here today to oversee the new album's final mixes. It's a brotherhood, a band of brothers. It's been 15 years since Carpenter, Moreno, and Cunningham began jamming together as high school students in their native Sacramento, California, and 8 years since the group, which is completed by bassist Chade Chang and DJ Frank Delgado, made its debut in 1995 with the aptly titled Adrenaline. That disc, along with the group's 1997 release, Around the Fur, marked Deftones as one of the most aggressive rap rock nu metal bands, a perhaps unfair bit of stereotyping and pigeonholing about which the guitarists have plenty to say, but it was 2000's White Pony that showed the depth and breadth of their musical vision. Deftones' third album, White Pony, was by far their most innovative. On it, they incorporated dense layers of wildly inventive psychedelic noise guitar, think Pink Floyd meets My Bloody Valentine, and grinding industrial textures similar to those produced by their friends and fellow travelers in Tool. And for the first time, the group balanced Moreno's savage screaming with more melodic, moody, and ethereal interludes. Debuting at number 3 on the Billboard albums charts, White Pony quickly racked up platinum sales to become the band's most successful offering. But the group's level of artistic and commercial triumph took a grueling toll. By the time they completed touring in support of White Pony, Deftones had been on the road nearly nonstop for more than a decade, with only a couple months off at a time. Looking back, the band members say they had been exhausted before they even started recording the album. When we made White Pony, we were a little bit fried and burned out, says Cunningham. We just toured tons, which is normal, I guess. That's how it goes in bands. For the making of Deftones, the band members decided to build their own studio, believing the luxury would allow them to do things at our leisure on our own time, says Cunningham. But when all was said and done, it turned out to be another experience, another way of doing things that just dragged on. And on and on and on. But judging from the tracks that I hear first at Larrabee and later on the finished Deftones, self-titled, the results were well worth the trouble and the wait. At one point in our interview, Carpenter and Moreno bounced off the couches and enthusiastically dragged me into the control room to hear the results of their labors. Carpenter elbows the engineer aside and dials up the finished mix for Needles and Pins. The rampaging tune is marked by stark, Led Zeppelin-like dynamic shifts, a propulsive rhythm, Moreno's typically passionate vocals, and an absolutely massive guitar riff. Carpenter played 7-string Axis exclusively on this disc. The song is a perfect example of the new album's swirling, layered, and subtly nuanced hard rock. And with the other songs on Deftones, subtitle, it demonstrates a logical progression from White Pony. Carpenter cranks up the volume to a level guaranteed to cause inner ear damage. Moreno stands back, smiling broadly, while the lead guitarist positions himself directly in front of the massive speakers, closes his eyes, and bangs his head in time. His pride in these propulsive new sounds is as intense as the care he took rolling that massive joint, which he and his partner have finally polished off. Located in the scenic hill country about a 90-minute drive northeast of San Francisco, Sacramento is a nowheresburg, a boring strip malls and unremarkable urban sprawl. At least that's how the Deftones describe it. When you're in Sacto, you're stuck, says Carpenter. It was there, however, that Deftones famously came together with the help of a drunk driver who had plowed into Carpenter's vehicle. With his mother's approval, the aspiring guitarist spent the resulting financial settlement on band gear. Soon after, friends from the local skateboard park were gathering in his garage and making a spirited noise that was inspired by the Bay Area punk funk of Faith No More and old school metal like Metallica. When I was growing up, I was definitely a metalhead, says Carpenter, but I listened to everything the whole time. It wasn't like I just listened to metal. I like being able to draw from rock from all times. I listened to a lot of oldies and stuff like that too. And a lot of the special effects that they did then were done in like real time. They made the sounds, you know? So I liked all the old vintage ideals as well as the new ones. When it comes to metal, Carpenter's favorite group is Meshuggah. There's no better band, the guitarist says. Outside of them, Depeche Mode is like the all-time classic for me. I love everything they do, and Zeppelin is just the best band of all time. Moreno's tastes are equally as wide and varied. He has said many times that his fondness for the band's ambient detours is rooted in the new wave sounds of The Cure and The Smiths, both of whom serve as rather unlikely inspirations. It's a total mood thing, the singer says. I can't believe that more people aren't influenced by that. It's good to have songs where people can do whatever they want just because a band has been pigeonholed into whatever kind of scene. For us, it's new metal or whatever. It doesn't mean that's how the band works. I just hear sounds. I hear so much stuff going on around me, and I try to take it all in and push it somewhere way away from Earth. Pink Floyd definitely did that. There is plenty of old-fashioned Floyd in Deftones' modern grooves, but Carpenter maintains that he was never a huge fan of the group. That's a bit hard to believe, I say, given the many Floydian touches on Deftones and White Pony. Honestly, I didn't grow up listening to Pink Floyd, Carpenter insists. I still haven't listened to all their records. But when I do hear a Pink Floyd song like Welcome to the Machine or something like that, I bug out. I'm like, this shit is effing sick. Maybe there's a part of me where I don't want to get into them too much because it would just take away from what I'm doing naturally. One thing's for sure, Deftones have always displayed a heck of a lot more angst than the Floyd, especially on MTV and radio favorites like My Own Summer, Shove It, and Be Quiet and Drive Far Away. Their disaffection grew largely out of suburban teenage boredom and the pressures to conform to a society that didn't reflect their views and opinions. But racism was also an issue, especially in high school where groups tend to form their own cliques and stick with them to the exclusion of others. Moreno caught flack from both sides. He wasn't Hispanic enough for the Hispanic kids, and he wasn't white enough for the white kids. I don't speak Spanish, though I can understand a little bit, he says. It's not my fault that my parents didn't teach me to speak Spanish. But in the metal scene, as in the skateboard world, common interests help to erase the differences. I was pretty lucky as far as prejudice goes, says Moreno. The kids I hung out with were skateboarders, and they were listening to heavy music and skateboarding. The other Hispanic kids called me the white one. The thing is, they were cool about it. It's not like they were messing with me. They were just teasing me. It was cool. But then the sun would go down and I'd see them go off to do something to get into trouble. And I'd just go the other way. It was a decision that I made and they were still cool to me. They didn't call me a loser or nothing like that. They just knew I was into something different. Maybe they did look at me a little bit weird, Moreno continues, but luckily I had Stefan and a handful of other guys who were into music, playing it and listening to it. And we all just kind of came together, all the kids who were into skateboarding and listening to different types of music. According to the band, race has always been more of an issue to outsiders. When we first started doing interviews, that subject came up almost all the time, says Moreno. People would say, "Isn't it weird that you guys play metal?" And I was like, "What do you mean it's weird?" I mean, for one thing, I don't know what it's like to be white, so I don't have anything to compare it to. I just like what I like. It's not like we're trying to be any one thing. I like all kinds of music. I listen to West Coast rapper, Too Short, and a whole lot more. I take in any music. Why are white people so afraid of everybody? Carpenter interjects. White people are afraid of everybody who's darker than them, man. But it's not about looks or race when it comes to metal. It's about just being true. Deftones think a lot about where they fit on metal's spectrum of styles, between mainstream metal at one end and the underground sounds that they have always found more inspiring at the other. They hope that the experimentation of White Pony hasn't cost them their hardcore metalhead following, and that the new Deftones, self-titled, won't finish the job. But they make no apologies for charting their own course. "I thought we'd lose the audience when we did White Pony," Barrino says. "We still hear from a lot of people who ask, 'What's your new album like? Is it more like White Pony or more hard and heavy?' And I'm like, it's hard and heavy, but it's also nice and sweet sometimes too. That's how our records have always been. If people really listen, Adrenaline had some melodic stuff too, but there was also a lot of knucklehead shit, like me screaming and being pissed off at everybody and thinking everybody was out to get me and shit." Which brings us to the dreaded matter of genre categorization, clearly a sore subject with the band. "We're like the kings of new metal, dude," says Carpenter, laughing heartily before I can even ask a question on the subject. "Nobody wants to be pigeonholed, man," Marino adds. "It's so funny that we're considered new metal," Carpenter continues. "I feel like I've been playing metal the whole time. I was just trying to be effing metal. I don't know where the new metal part came from. I think it became new metal when fashion came into it," Marino says. "This is true up to a point, I know, but the genre was born when bands like Korn, Incubus, and Deftones began emphasizing hip hop influences in their hard rock mix. But the rap was there all along," Carpenter says defensively. "I mean, Anthrax was doing that like a decade ago. We're all caught up in the rap game now." "The whole world is," says Marino. "There are M&Ms all over the place. I see them every day on every corner. To me, that's really what I grew up in, the urban shit. And when I see everybody else trying to be like that, I'm like, how's that fun? I'm glad I don't live in that neighborhood anymore. You know what I'm saying? I don't get it how people want to be so down with the ghetto. It shaped the person I am or whatever, but it's certainly nothing to glorify." "But it's always that way, man," he adds. "All the hip hoppers want to be rockers, and all the rockers want to play some hip hop. And honestly, I don't. I despise hip hop for certain reasons. The same way I despise metal. They both can be corny as F." "9 out of 10 times they both are corny as F," adds Carpenter. "But you can take the right elements of any kind of music, whether it's country music or whatever the hell it is, and you can make that shit sick," Marino concludes. "As long as it's genuine and some heartfelt shit, it sounds good. Call it rap rock, call it metal, call it new metal. At the end of the day, the only label that Carpenter and Marino fully embrace is Deftones music. Every time our shit is done, I can say, you know what? From start to finish, it's tight," says Carpenter. "Every song, no matter how many times you want to take it apart and say, it sounds like this or sounds like that, it doesn't matter. From start to finish, every song on the new record will move you and take you somewhere, and you won't want to turn it off." If there's an underlying theme to the songs of Deftones, self-titled, it's the power of music to transform and transport the listener. Witness the rampaging opener Hexagram, which contrasts furious hard rockin' verses with fractured rhythmic breaks on which Moreno howls play and worship, play and worship. Just as striking as the penultimate track, Anniversary of an Uninteresting Event, a wonderfully ethereal mood piece built on grand piano on a Deftones record. A spare rhythm track of bass drum and tambourine and great washes of noise from mallets on cymbals. It sounds as if it could have been slated into the Beatles' psychedelic masterpiece Revolver or Pink Floyd's trippy metal. Most uplifting of all, though, is the striking first single, Minerva, which once again alternates unrelenting rhythmic verses with gorgeous, ultra melodic choruses. Moreno seems to dig deep into his soul to belt out the key line, God bless you all for the song you saved us. Moreno has always been reluctant to discuss his lyrics, but he smiles when I ask about that line and whether or not he believes music has the power to save people. He clearly does. After all, music rescued Deftones from Sacto, but he'll only address the tune in the broadest of terms. I just think there's some beautiful shit going on right now, but there's some really effing shady shit going on too, he says. Still, there are some really simple things like a woman's voice or hearing someone sing a song that can just instill this feeling of ecstasy. It can be the simplest thing, but everything can build on that. The singer's lyrical style has always been oblique. In the past, Moreno has enjoyed playing characters that are clearly quite different from him, adopting Elian Rose a la David Bowie or Peter Gabriel in songs such as White Pony's Frightening, Kidnap Fantasy, Fetiseria. I did that a lot more on White Pony than on this one, he says. That was a time in my life when I was kind of bored and I just wanted to be somebody else. This one was more stream of consciousness. Indeed, witness the lyrics for the new track Lucky You, which adds a hefty dose of dub, reggae experimentation to Deftones' usual sonics to You've crossed the walls, excelled, further along through their hell. All for my heart, I'll watch you kill. Are these lines from the thoroughly savage headbanger When Girls Telephone Boys? If you like that, we can ride on a black horse, a great new wave, Hesperian death horse. I'll be damned if I know what Moreno is talking about in either tune, and as I said, he isn't inclined to explain. There are interesting stories behind many of the band's tunes. Fetiseria, for instance, was inspired by a Brazilian TV game show in which the winner gets to drink milk from the host's navel, while the Grip and Knife Party, also from White Pony, came about after Cunningham was playing with his collection of blades on the tour bus. But rather than impose his readings on the band's fans, the singer wants listeners to find their own meanings in the songs on Deftones, self-titled. Whatever means the most to you, that's cool, he says. I don't necessarily realize what a song is about until years go by. Whatever it takes to get the words out, that's what it takes. But in the end, I'm hearing the sound that's going along with the music more than I'm hearing the particular words. On Deftones, self-titled, as in the past, Marino's vocals were the last part to be completed. I always make fun of him every record, even though I definitely don't mind that he takes until the end to do his thing, says Carpenter. As we're writing a song, he'll have some phrases he's working with. He'll still be building the lyric as we're recording, but he won't force it. Even when the song is done, I don't even know what he's saying half the time. When he does his vocals, it's like the final instrumental track has been laid on. I don't pay attention to his words. It's the notes, the melodies that his voice hits, and how his voice lays against the music that I like. It's always been that way, adds Marino. I'll just hear something and feel a certain thing and start singing. I'll let the music create whatever mood it may be, but the music is pretty much written. For Deftones, self-titled, the group once again worked with producer Terry Date, who's been behind the console for the band from the beginning. What does he bring to Deftones' mix? He just gives us that sound, says Carpenter. He's the final stage. Moreover, Date is smart enough to give this band of brothers the freedom to work at its own pace in its own style. He'll interject his opinion when he feels the need for it, but more or less, he's just trying to keep us from being us, hanging out all the time and doing nothing. Carpenter laughs heartily. It's like, get to work. Left to their own devices, the members of Deftones will slack off. We're the laziest band on the planet, Carpenter confesses. Certainly, there were long stretches during the making of the new album where very little happened. Recording started in the band's new rehearsal space in Sacto, the Spot, a warehouse that didn't even have air conditioning when the project began. Eventually, the project moved to Seattle Studio X before finally traveling south again to wind up at Larrabee. During that time, each of the musicians hit 30. As a result, they felt the need to slow down and break from the grind of the past few years to recharge their creative batteries and spend some time at home. We got to spend the last year and a half actually living our lives, Marino says with a sigh. We got to take time off and go home and kick it. I got to live in my house, drive in my car, do shit that normal people do, clean my pool. Ironically, it didn't take long for Moreno and Carpenter to become involved in some extracurricular music adventures. Moreno formed Team Sleep at home in Sacto and made an as yet unreleased album with some unlikely long distance collaborators, including former Faith No More vocalist Mike Patton, ex Hole bassist Melissa Oftemore, and former Helium guitarist and vocalist Mary Timony. That was a good thing, a totally useful thing, the singer says, explaining why he interrupted his time off with a musical project. I can only watch so much effing television. You can only rake so many leaves until there are no more to rake. At the same time Moreno was at work with Team Sleep, Carpenter moved to Manhattan Beach near Los Angeles and worked with Cypress Hill frontman B Real in a project called Kush. Me and B have been friends forever and we just make music. It's not like a big thing, Carpenter says. We've got a record ready, we think. We just haven't finished it. When Deftones finally gathered to work on their own album, they took an approach that was radically different from the one they'd taken on their previous records. It's not like when we were younger, when we were kids and we would get together to jam and write songs, Carpenter says. Now the only time we write songs is when we're done touring and have to make a record. As a result, we're writing songs with a record in mind, and as we're doing them, the sound of the record starts to come through. How to tweak it in different directions and stuff like that. We all listen to our music through headphones, so we like to put a lot of subtle things into the mix. They don't jump out because we have the drums, the guitars, the core instruments blasting through, but we've always got stuff layered all around. Adds Moreno, Deftones subtitle sounds different from White Pony, and not just because it's been a couple years in the making. I mean, you've got 3 albums behind you, and you don't want to follow any of the same formulas that you used on any of those other records. So there's a lot more thinking involved. It's not that we overthink the process, but I'm just so glad that there are deadlines. Because without them, the MFer would never have been finished. We'd have just kept working on it. As is often the case, Carpenter has the final word on making Deftones subtitle. The key ingredient, a lot of weeds, he says, laughing. I guess you could say the key to this album was experimentation, but it wasn't a conscious thing. It was more about just relaxing and going with the flow. And if something happened, something happened. If nothing happened, then fine, no rush. That's kind of been the whole attitude for the record. We decided it was okay to chill out for a minute. For 3 records, we've been rushed, 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 because we didn't want to let our fans down. Well, now we're saying, hold up, let us determine things for ourselves. We're not letting anyone down, and we're not going to give the people crappy music if we take our time. Now that the disc is finally done, Deftones are gearing up once again to hit the road, starting with a series of club dates before they join the Summer Sanitarium tour with Metallica, Linkin Park, Limp Bizkit, and Mudvayne in July and August. 2 months after our chat at Larrabee and a few weeks before the start of their high-profile summer jaunt, Deftones undertake a select series of mid-sized club shows, a guerrilla tour designed to generate excitement for the new disc. The show I witnessed at Chicago's Metro, capacity 1,100, sells out instantly, as do all the shows on the short tour. Fans lucky enough to get a ticket start lining up 3 hours before showtimes to secure a prime vantage point near the stage. While Deftones finally appear, they start strong with a rampaging version of My Own Summer, Shove It. Through the first half of their generous 2-hour performance, they favor songs from Around the Fur, using the crowd's familiarity with the older material to get things rolling. They are clearly energized after their long break and happy to be back on the road. Although not exactly tan and well rested, they're certainly ready to rock, and the packed crowd responds in kind, turning the floor of the club into a churning mass of sweaty, flailing limbs. They call you Shy, spelt C-H-I, short for Chicago, Moreno says, as he stands atop the crowd barricade and leans into the outstretched arms of the faithful. But you isn't shy at all. As the set progresses, the group adds more new material, searing versions of Hexagram, Good Morning Beautiful, and Bloody Cape. Although it's still 2 weeks before the new album's release, the fans respond with as much enthusiasm as they show for the well-known favorites, and the musicians couldn't seem happier. Has success spoiled the band of brothers, the inhabitants of planet Deftones? The quality of weed they can now afford and their willingness to share it aside, I would have to say the answer is a resounding no. End. And this is the sidebar to the seventh power. Stephen Carpenter and Chino Moreno didn't know how low they could go until they added an extra string to their guitars. Guitar World. There's a notion popular among some critics that everything that can be done with guitars, bass, and drums has been done. Yet you guys consistently come up with totally new and radical guitar sounds, Stephen Carpenter. That's why I'm playing 7-string guitars now. I'm sick of using just 6 strings. It's just too limiting for me right now. What does playing 7 strings do for you? For me, it fills out the rhythm. I can go to that lower realm and the guitar will just sound solid. We're tuned down to G sharp, which is pretty low. What effects are you using? I use only one effect on the entire record and only on one song. I have a lot of effects in my racks and on my pedal board, but they're mainly for live shows. They help me cover myself. So if I say break a string, I can throw on some delay, take off the guitar and strap on another one while the first guitar is still making noise. Gino, you've been playing a lot more guitars in the band since White Pony. Do you add your parts later in the tracking process, or do you record with the band? I do both. Stefan and I have very different sounds, and when we play together, sometimes it just takes everything up a level. It's almost like hearing the guitars in stereo. What sets you two apart as guitarist? He's really technical and precise player, whereas I just kind of enhance the mood that he's creating. Stefan has a more jagged style of playing, and his right hand is way more precise than mine. Also tend to use a strumming style while he does more picking, so we have different styles and abilities, and when they work really well, but on some songs I just don't play guitar. We've been holding out for all these years having one guitar sound, and we've had the same level and intensity with one guitar, but with two guitars you can get a little more melodic. Are you using any effects? No, I use a chorus pedal and a fuzz tone a little bit, but mostly I just play through a Marshall head, the one that's so thick and warm. If synths are used right and in small amounts, they can totally add a whole other element to the music. For example, instead of trying to play a keyboard line or melody on the synth, we just use little notes for mood and stuff. We did that a lot more on this record than we ever have, but still I think we did it tastefully. There are some real sonic departures on this record. I mean, I never thought I'd hear grand piano on a Deftones disc. Have you thought about how you're going to play a song like Anniversary of a Uninteresting Event when you tour? I think we always put one or two songs that on our records that are just for the sake of the album. We do that to add something different to the album. But we can play anything live. To play a song like Anniversary of a Uninteresting Event on stage, we would probably have to minimize the arrangement. It's already pretty minimal, but I think we could do it. It would just be a matter of allocating all the parts out. There are enough of us that we could do it.